it is my pleasure to introduce a woman who has certainly made history. She has spoken truth to power for years. She has been the subject of presidential tweets and attacks. She has waged a war on behalf of the marginalized. She has raised her voice when others told her to be quiet and to sit down. She just kept talking. And certainly, as the senator from Massachusetts, she certainly made a historic run for president of the United States. And we're happy to welcome her to our stage today, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Reverend Flake. I so appreciate it. It's such a generous introduction. And also, thank you, Reverend Green. It is such an honor to be here to share the stage with you. And hello, JusticeCon. I mean, this is fabulous. I am grateful for the opportunity to be with all of you on Juneteenth. You know, I see Juneteenth as a chance to retell the story, a resilient story of African Americans, of how even in the face of hatred and injustice and oppression, that Black Americans have never stopped imagining and fighting for a better tomorrow. But we also know that Juneteenth is not just about celebration. It is a necessary reminder that 155 years later, Black Americans still feel the weight of government-sponsored racism and discrimination that devalue their lives and their livelihoods. You know, the next discussion is a powerful panel called Say Her Name, Justice for Black Women and Girls. And let's just be clear about an unshakable truth. The deep inequities that persist in America fall especially hard on Black women. I want to take a moment to say a name we cannot afford to forget or ignore right now: Brianna Taylor. Brianna Taylor, a 26-year-old Black woman, was in her home in Louisville, Kentucky on March 13th when the police broke down her door, fired over 20 shots, and ultimately took her life. More than 3 months later, the police officers that killed Brianna Taylor have still not been arrested. Brianna's story happens, and it happens every day across this country. Black women and girls are brutalized at alarming rates. The murder of Black trans women is an epidemic in America. We must commit to making real change, not just passing empty words back and forth. No one policy or one law will erase the legacy of slavery and systemic racism in our country. No one law or policy will end police brutality. It's going to take significant work to root out white supremacy in this country. But that's where we can start. We need to put in place real accountability for everyone, including law enforcement officers who are responsible for the unjustified killings of countless Black women and Black Americans. We also need to focus our budgets less on locking people up and more on the community investments that lift people up. And we need to remember, this is not just about our criminal justice system. It's about rooting out the racial disparities in our healthcare system, our educational system, our housing policies, in the workplace, and every place in society. We know that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely than white women to die from pregnancy or childbirth-related causes. Black women are more likely to be on the front lines in the COVID-19 crisis as essential workers, risking their health and their lives to keep our country running. Black women are paid less than men and paid less than white women. And the racial wealth gap holds back Black women, Black girls, and their families. To ensure opportunity for Black Americans, we can start with providing assistance to first-time home buyers who live in formerly redline neighborhoods. We can start by canceling student loan debt, by funding historically Black colleges and universities, and by investing in small businesses, giving Black entrepreneurs the resources they need. There is so much that we could do. Right now, we are facing a public health emergency and an economic crisis, both of which are disproportionately affecting Black people. At the same time, it feels like every day we're watching a new video or hearing a report of racist violence against Black Americans, and too often at the hands of the police. You are fearful for your lives and the lives of your loved ones, but you're still here today to talk about how to build a fairer, more equal, and more just America. Now, I have not personally experienced and can never truly understand the fear, the oppression, and the pain that confronts Black Americans. But none of us can ignore what is happening in this country. I understand the responsibility that I and others have as white Americans to come together and ask what we are doing to dismantle a system that has too often undervalued Black life. We cannot just be allies, we must be anti-racists. So I want you to know you're not alone in this fight. Over the last few weeks, people have poured into the streets to protest police violence. They've poured into the streets because racist violence and white supremacy are still being used as tools of oppression to devalue Black lives. I stand with you and will do everything in my power to keep fighting for justice. On Juneteenth and on every day, let's commit to making Black lives matter in America. So again, thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us on today. Now, you know that I'm very excited about this next panel. Say her name, Justice for Black Women and Girls. And I'm happy to introduce to you our moderator for this panel, Sister Crystal Leaphart. She is a community activist in the DC area, and we are so excited. We have some fantastic panelists, and we are just standing on tiptoe, waiting to hear what you have to offer us today. Crystal.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here and to be a part of this very timely and important conversation. So I just want to start with a little bit of framing around some of the issues that Black women and girls have to deal with, and what do we need as far as community to step in and engage in those issues as well. So whether we're talking about a maternal health crisis, violence, school push out for Black girls, and income equality. There are just so many issues that don't frame from a gendered perspective in the Black community, and we want to take some time on this panel to kind of dive into some of those intersections, some of those issues, and more importantly, some of those solutions. So again, I'm super excited. I'm trying not to fangirl with this panel, but this is an amazing just collection of Black women that are just doing amazing work on the ground, on a national level. And again, just really excited to dive into this conversation with you all. So maybe if you all want to start with brief intros of yourself, starting with Brianna, then we can go to Dr. Griggs, and then Dr. And correct me if I'm saying this wrong, please, Guidry. We'll go in that order, and maybe you all can just give us a background of your work, and just let us know how you're feeling with everything going on. How's this, just this uprising and the pandemic affecting your approach to the work? And then we can get into some questions.
Thank you for that introduction. Honor and a privilege to be here. I'm Brianna Baker, and I founded Justice for Black Girls. How I'm feeling in this moment is urgent. Our girls need a lot from us right now. And in honor of Toyin and Salua, my organization has launched the Freedom Fighters Fund, which was able to conjure $75,000, and we'll be able to offer immediate relief to Black girl activists on the ground. So this Juneteenth, in honor of Juneteenth, we're granting 30 girls $150 micro grants, and we'll do that 3 times over. So by the end of the year, 100 Black girls will be able to have life-sustaining supports. And so that gives me power to do the work, the ways that people have come together to rally around Black girls, recognizing that far too often Black girls experience placelessness in a space and place that forces them to exist at the intersection of racial injustice and gender-based violence, right? In addition to that, Justice for Black Girls is launching our For Little Girls curriculum in honor of the 4 little girls who lost their lives in 1963 in Birmingham. And then our Justice for Black Girls Ambassadors program, which is a 6-week summer program focused on Black girlhood as a subject worthy of inquiry. Far too often our girls' experiences are marginal. And at JBG, we recognize them central to our understanding, to our world, and to Black liberation.
That's amazing. Well, my name is Reverend Dr. Nichelle Guidry. I currently serve as the Dean of Sisters Chapel at Spelman College. I'm the creator of She Preaches, which is a professional development organization for African American millennial women in ministry. And in this moment, I can say that I feel like my help is coming on. And as a person that's rooted in faith, I have to be truthful and acknowledge that this has been a hard week as a Black woman. We have seen a lot of devastation, a lot of dehumanization of our sisters this week. And we have had to not only bear the weight of survival, but we've also had to bear the weight of a lot of teaching and a lot of educating and a lot of awareness raising. And this has been a weary week, and I don't know if it's because it's Juneteenth and I'm a native Texan, or I don't know if it's because I'm here with my sisters. But in this moment, I feel my help is coming on. I feel excitement. I feel like there's a power in our togetherness, and there's a power when 2 or 3 are gathered. So right now, I'm excited to be in this space. I'm excited for this conversation. I'm excited for the possibilities of what can happen because of this conversation. So happy to be here, and I'm grateful to be here with you all. Y'all are so amazing.
Well, hello, everyone. I am, again, excited to be here as well. My name is Stephanie Joy, and currently, I am from Queens, New York, but currently I reside in Houston, Texas. And of course, I can feel the energy in Houston right now. I'm so excited because I've literally watched our Black girls use their voice and learn that their voice matters, and nothing is more important than them using their voice and knowing that they have authority and power behind what they're saying. And so my work is, I have an organization called The True Beauty in You. I work with 2 different demographics. I work with ages 5 to 12, and then I work from 13 to 18. And so we just must, Dr. Cannon said, do the work your soul must have. And that's all I'm trying to do. Just do the work,
yes.
My soul must have, and encourage these Black girls. So thank you.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to ask us to also welcome Bishop Mckenzie. I believe she's in the queue, and she's going to join us actually now. That was perfect. Welcome to the conversation, Bishop. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you.
If you will,
Thank
can you give a brief introduction of yourself and your work, and just tell us how you're feeling in this moment, whether it's the pandemic, the uprising, Juneteenth, and just all of what's going on. Just tell us how you're feeling right now before we get started.
Well, sure. Bishop Vashti Mckenzie. I serve as the presiding bishop of the 10th Episcopal District of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is the great state of Texas. This is where I preside. All the thoughts and feelings of this moment is that once again, we find ourselves with another trauma and another tragedy. We have been working in the A.M.E. Church for years in social justice. In fact, our denomination was founded not because of a theological discussion, but because of injustice. And so we walked out of St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church and to Anvil Smith Shop. And upon the anvil, we have been trying to break the chains of injustice and cruelty year after year, year after year, year after year. And so we've been doing this all along. In our ministry, we have, of course, our voter registration drive, voter education drive. We have forums for people to be educated on the issues. As far as in women is concerned, women leadership has been my passion forever. And I have been working to train and create opportunities for women to be able to grasp a whole and navigate our narrative and navigate our culture. So from the Circle of Love to now the Sailor Leadership Encounter for Women, where we bring women from diverse backgrounds to come together and have critical conversations. And our last Sailor, which is now virtual because we're not able to meet face-to-face because of this COVID-19, Val Demings and young activists were able to engage in critical conversations under grace, under fire, on where do we go from here. And so for working with African-American women and girls year after year, we are trying to work to dispel the stereotypes that seem to shackle us and follow us like a shadow day after day after day. And I'm happy for an opportunity to engage in this conversation.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question, and this is for all the panelists. So generally speaking, Black women and femmes are just fierce protectors and advocates for our entire communities. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that love being given back to us when we have things that are going on, like you mentioned, maternal health and wellness, intimate partner violence, and all these other issues. Why do you all think that is, and what do you think we can do as a community to help bridge those gaps for Black women, femmes, and girls in our communities? I know that's a big one. You're going to get started.
I can start. I think that Kimberly Crenshaw does an exceptional job kind of painting out why that happens, right? Intersectionality allows us to really examine the ways in which different markers of our identity impact us differently. So rather than trying to identify which part of your identity is experiencing the most oppression, you recognize that each part of your identity introduces you to different types of oppression, and those impact you uniquely at the same time, right? And so as Black girls are experiencing not only racism, but sexism and heterosexism and Islamophobia and all the different things that interact with our identities, we have layers and layers of oppression and trauma that we're forced to face, right? While our society doesn't really want us to make sense of them in real ways and would rather us fragment our identity to think about the one that impacts us the most. I think that I find the most joy in knowing that Black women can be our own saviors. There has never been a movement for Black lives that we have not been on the front lines of, and we continue to show up for ourselves. I am continuously disappointed when I wait for someone else to stand up for Black women because it just doesn't happen the way it needs to. But I know that we are our own saviors. I find joy, I find liberation, I find solace, and knowing that there is solidarity in Black women who have done this work, who like to do it now, who are continuing to push and press on behalf of Black women and girls. And there is nothing like a group of Black women determined to change the world. And so that is where I find my joy in knowing that Black women, Black girls will experience full liberation.
I agree. And I also, I think Professor Moya Bailey coins a term called misogynoir. And misogynoir is basically the sort of conflation of misogyny and racism. It is the very particular experience of dehumanization that Black women face throughout the diaspora. And, I think that what we have to remember about misogynoir is that it comes part and parcel with the white supremacists and the white supremacy and the patriarchy that are endemic in the United States of America and indeed throughout the world. So when people ask the question, why are Black women so hated? I often point to the culture this context that not only hates Black people, but has a disdain for Black women. If you look back, if you can trace back the presence of this misogynoir in this country, it goes all the way back to the plantation, where Black women had it much harder than Black men. But because of the patriarchy that still exists in this country, Black men are often even more exalted and protected than Black women are. We see that in the movement now. We see that in the emphasis, not only on George Floyd and the other, cisgender heterosexual men that have unfortunately died as a result of state-sanctioned anti-Black violence, but we see it in the sort of the quiet sort of way that Black women who suffered the same fate are treated, particularly in the media. And so that's part of the why. It's because of the culture. It's because of the country. It's because this country hates Black people and hates Black women. But I also want to say that in that same story, in that same lineage, in that same history, there are stories of women such as Sojourner Truth, that provided a counter voice, a counter narrative, and not just publicly, but Black women have been very, very creative and very subversive in our resistance to systemic misogynoir. And we're in an era right now where if it wasn't for Black women, there would be no movement. And so we are building as Black women upon a lineage of radical resistance. We are building in this moment upon a foundation that has been laid by generations of freedom fighting Black women whose work we're just carrying on and whose lineage we are proud to stand in this day. And so that's what's given me hope amidst all this hopelessness is we aren't the first to do it. We ain't new to it. We true to it.
Absolutely. What brings a part of what brings joy in the midst of the pain is the agility and the adaptability of Black women. We have always had to fight and always had to work. We always had to fight for our children and fight for our men, and we always had to work. And so we have become now trauma technicians. That's exactly what we do. We're trauma technicians. We are guiding our children through the trauma of this season, and for millennials and younger generations, this is their first time. For some of us, this is not our first time. And so having conversations with our children, both male and female, conversations that we never thought we would have to do again to help them come home safe at the end of the day. People just do not understand the angst of mothers with Black sons, or the angst of Black mothers, period, who send their children out and not quite sure if they're going to make it home for the day. My joy is that women have been agile and adaptive, creative to be able to survive in this environment. The same way that our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers were agile and adaptive to be able to survive in the environment of their times. What makes me angry, however, is that how come we are the ones that have to make an adjustment to this disease called racism and sexism? We're the ones that have to tell our children, this is what you have to do if you encounter a police. You have to keep your hands at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Do not reach for the glove box. Do not turn the light on inside of the car so that they will see what you're doing and see who else is in the car. Be respectful, be even toned, try not to escalate. We're the ones making all the adjustment for their disease, where their children or other ethnic groups' children don't have to make that kind of decision. That's what makes me angry. When people who are supposed to protect and serve and people who are supposed to make just laws do not have to make any adjustments like that. Where we're talking, the police need to make adjustments with de-escalation training, psyche evals before hiring, a database on those who continue to use deadly and excessive force. They're not making any changes. But we who are oppressed And victims of sexism and racism have to make all of the adjustments. That's what makes me angry.
And I would just go on and say that this is why we have to teach our Black girls to honor our Black women, our Black mothers, because they need this lesson. And Alice Walker said the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. And reality is Black girls feel their power taken away every time they are devalued, dismissed, discarded, objectified, assaulted, whether it's figuratively or physically. Therefore, we as Black women have the responsibility of just aiding our Black girls by creating an intentionally safe space for them. And creating a safe space for Black girls looks like just allowing them to share their truth and their experiences and teach and allow their experiences to teach them and influence their future without using the Bible as tool of judgment, but rather as a weapon to combat the harsh realities of our current times. So this is why we need the lessons of our mothers. This is why we need the lessons of Bishop Mckenzie. This is why we need the lessons. We have to create this safe space for our girls to learn so we can conquer what's going on today.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to come back to a few of the things that you all mentioned towards the end, but I want to start with Brianna around say her name and the work that you do around justice for Black girls. So if you don't know, Say Her Name was also started by Kimberly Crenshaw and other groups like BYP 100 to focus solely on the ways that Black women have to interact with the state and state-based violence and police killings and things of that nature. And again, we acknowledge a lot of the Black men in our communities that have fallen victim to police violence. The Black women are lucky if they get a footnote in regards to what's going on with us. And also, I want to bring in that police officers' second and third misconduct issues are related to gender-based violence in our communities. So sexual assault and violence and domestic violence. How can we better frame these issues in a way that we talk about what's going on in the community at large, whether it's Black women, Black trans women, Black femmes, and Black girls?
Thank you for that question. I firmly believe that erasure is violence. And when we don't acknowledge, one, that Black girls are experiencing this, then we are doing our girls a profound disservice. We don't elevate the name of Dejaria Becton. We don't elevate Tamir Rice's sister, who actually watched him die, but we don't even consider her role in the story. He died in her hands, and we don't even pay attention to the ways in which she experienced that trauma. There's so many Black girls' names that we don't even bother to elevate. And far too often we push the narrative that it's only Black boys that have to fear their lives, when Black girls again exist at the intersection of not only racial injustice but gender-based violence. Black girls are often fighting two wars at the same time and are struggling with that placelessness in a world that refuses to recognize the wonder of their Blackness and their girlhood. It is a difficult time to be Black, and it's even more difficult to be a Black girl. And we as a community have to do a far better job standing up on behalf of our babies. No child asked to be here. So we must create and carve out space that affirms their full being. We have to stop asking our Black girls to fragment parts of themselves, to align themselves more with their Blackness and their girlhood. We have to acknowledge them as one complete piece that lacks nothing, right? We have to affirm our Black trans girls. We have to affirm all of that. We have to allow people to be their best selves, and we have to unlearn the parts of us that told us that we weren't enough. There are also Black women who have been, their girlhood was interrupted, right? And so we have to be okay with recognizing that our girls deserve better, that our experiences might not have been pristine, but we have to be intentional about it, creating a better world for our babies. And so we have to reimagine what girlhood should look like, not the girlhood we had. And so we have to unlearn the elements of our girlhood and our womanhood that were negative, that told us that we weren't enough, the trauma that we're still overgoing now, right? The ways in which that we question our ability and our capacity. We have to undo those things and do that work in ourselves so we can create a safer and more profound and affirming space for our children, for our babies, for our Black girls.
Thank you. The next question is for Bishop Mckenzie. I just want to hear a little bit more about how, in your position and in your role in the faith community, how you're trying to address patriarchy and misogynoir in the faith community at large.
Well, when you are a leader, and all of you are leaders in your respective fields, whenever you walk in the room, it is against the tradition that happens that says that you don't have a right, you don't have a place, and you basically don't exist except for what you do between the kitchen and the bedroom. So in patriarchy, just to show up and to be competent, is one way. But what we also do is educate and then activate. Educate means that is teaching that, yes, I may be in a non-traditional role, and I am, the first woman elected in my denomination after 200 and some years. You walk into the room, you have to educate. Yes, I'm a woman, but that doesn't mean that I am not trained, I am not effective, and I don't have the experience to handle the job. Yes, I'm a woman, I may not do the way that you would do it, but I have various tools in my leadership toolkit, and I know how to use those tools. It's a matter of teaching older generations who never had to compete with women for jobs and positions. When newer generations, we're all in here kind of together. That still doesn't mean patriarchy is dead and gone. It still exists. And so you have to speak up against the microaggressions that happen on the job in your position. You have to point it out, speak up about it, and then help other people. It's a shame. We have to help them, back up, change, and turn around. We have to activate our own voices. For too many years, patriarchy has put us in a position where we always had to be better than the best man for the job in order to be considered. We have to work twice as hard and twice as long than the best man or the best other ethnic woman to have the job. We have to be the go-get-it girls, because for some, as my sister said, all the way back to slavery, we are viewed as strong. We're the strong Black woman, so we can do anything. And so we work harder, we work longer, and everybody else goes home at 5 o'clock. And so that does not speak to our own self-care, but that's another issue, maybe for another discussion. But we are perceived as being able to handle it all. But I must tell you, even the strongest woman needs to be encouraged. Even the strongest woman needs a hug and a pat on the back. Even the strongest woman needs a standing ovation every now and then. Even the strongest woman working hard in the trenches needs somebody in the balcony saying, go girl, go girl, go girl. And also saying, you need to go home and get some rest. You need to go home and get some sleep, because the culture and the patriarchy will exhaust you and exhaust you and exhaust you. And one day you hit the brick wall, and the brick wall always wins. And then the only thing people say, well, isn't it a shame? Did you hear what happened to her? Isn't it a shame? And so when I see so many women, the names of women who have committed suicide at the top of their game, it makes us have to come back and think in other ways and how we can change the culture so that all of us, men and women together, can work together. Now, in our African roots, men and women were partners in community building. They were partners in community building. And we have to go back to our roots so that we can become partners in community building. This culture pits us against each other. It's either one or the other. And what happens is the person who opens the door doesn't always keep it open for other people to follow. So I believe in teaching and training. After we educate them, we have to activate what we have been teaching and training, and be sure to pass these lessons down to the next generation and to the next generation, so they won't have to go through what their mothers went through.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that response. Dr. Grants, we're going to go to you next. If you can just take some time and explain how, in your perspective, the faith community can work to instill confidence and self-efficiency for Black women, femmes and girls, and also how community can kind of support girls in their journey to becoming women.
Sure. I would start off by saying that it is so imperative for the faith community to address the anger of Black girls, or else, you know, it would be harder for them to dismantle some of these stereotypes that Black women have to go through. And we as Black women, our Black girls, not to submit to a patriarchal system that includes rejecting themselves and detaching from their truth and emotional well-being, to speak up, stand up for themselves, even at an early age, right? Because if they learn the power of their voice before the age of 12, before the age of 18, when they become a Black woman, they will not be afraid to stand up for themselves in faith communities or outside of those communities. Also, we as a faith community can no longer afford to ignore the mask that our Black girls wear. It is my belief that some of our Black girls are wounded and just weary and just tired while trying to wear this mask as they seek to find themselves in a world that rejects who they are, but exploits and consumes their culture for financial gain. This tears down their confidence, which means we as the faith community can help rebuild in our own communities by acknowledging their internal power instead of disregarding their existence. So we as a faith community must empower and just encourage Black girls through sermons, therapy. We need to talk about self-care and self-love to create a path of healing and acceptance through understanding that their self-care is so important.
Thank you, thank you. Now, if we can go to Dr. Guidry. Did I say it right that time?
Dr. Guidry.
Guidry, okay. I'm going to get it right the last time. So if you can tell us a little bit about your work with She Preaches and how that space is changing the way that women in ministry do their work. And also, if I can add a little bit extra in there to get us ready for our next question, talk about how issues that you work on that are traditionally not seen as faith issues also intersect within faith, whether it's reproductive justice and health, misogynoir in our communities, and just leadership across the board.
Sure. So when I started She Preaches, it started out as a blog in 2012. It started at a point in my life where I was employed by a church, and I was not only a woman doing ministry there, but I was also the youngest person on staff. And so I was just at a point where I needed some collegiality. All of the sisters around this table probably know that it can often be an isolating experience to be a Black woman in leadership in Black ecclesial spaces. And so it was just a way to build community and to build fellowship. I think as I continued to sort of continue my vocation and really got a sense of not just the patriarchy that girds up the Black church, but the patriarchy that sort of infuses and informs most parts of how it functions. I realized that it was positioned to actually do resistance work. And so what we ended up doing was becoming a professional development organization. And we created worship experiences that were, that were womanist in nature. We only had Black women preaching. We talked outright about Black women's lived experiences, including sexual trauma, including mental health, including menstruation, including pregnancy loss and pregnancy termination. We brought it all into the sacred space, which for many Black women has been a space of silence, right? And so when I think about leadership, when I think about Black women's leadership in the church and elsewhere, I think about not only how important it is for women like Soror Bishop Vashti Mckenzie, who by representation enfleshes what it means to be not only a woman called by God, but a woman who's radical and audacious enough to say yes to that call. It's silence breaking, but my approach to leadership is, breaking silence and breaking stigma. So when I talk about things in church that have to do with rape culture, when I talk about things in church that have to do with pregnancy, loss, and termination, what I'm trying to do is not only be a voice of women's experiences, but what I'm also trying to do is be a voice crying out in the wilderness that God is also in our midst as Black women, going through life, going through struggles. Dr. Dolores S. Williams wrote an amazing book called Sisters in the Wilderness, and she draws an entire portrait of Black women's lived experiences and lives through the lens of Hagar in the book of Genesis. And when we have experiences like what happened this week, when the 19-year-old BLM activist Toyin Salau was killed, what we see in her tweets is that her assailant presented himself as a man of faith. Now, we don't know if he really was a man of faith, but in his presentation, what he conveyed to this young woman was that he was safe because he was a man of faith. Now, we in the Black church know that that's a false conflation, that just because a man professes a belief in God does not mean that he is not a predator. In fact, many predators want to present themselves in that way so that they can gain access, so that they can open up a vulnerable space and thereby, attack, right? And so part of what I feel like my role and our role as leaders is to raise the awareness, to raise the discernment of our girls, that if you are not an agent of your own safety and an agent of your own survival, then not only will we stand in your place and do what we can, but this world will be far more likely to take you out, right? In one of her tweets, she said, "I trusted the Holy Spirit to keep me safe." And as a faith leader, I heard that as an opportunity. We have work to do. We have to teach our girls. We have to train them to be able to discern, and to, in so doing, be agents of their own survival and thriving. So that's how I think of our work as women who lead in faith spaces.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. So for our last question, well, close to last question anyway, is around policy and around structural change. So with me being a policy person myself, I understand very clearly that though a lot of these issues are cultural and things that we need to be talking about through a culture shifting lens, I also know that there are firm policies in place that also upheld cultural stigma around Black women for so long. And though some of those things may be cleared off the books, that stigma and that culture that helped build the law is still there. So whether you're talking about Black women being the only people that have given birth to children on this land and have not automatically been given citizenship, whether it's Black women being the last group to gain our full right to vote with the Civil Rights Act, and even still getting resistance for that. And also just talking about the field of gynecology in general, where our bodies were the playground, if you will, of developing that field. A lot of that feeling and that approach to just the carelessness of Black women and our children and our families is still very clear. And I want to know what kind of policies do you recommend that people advocate for with their elected officials, whether it's on a local level, a state level, or a federal level, and what actions can people couple with that advocacy and with that voting to help shift those cultures in our communities?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that in policy that we can do is to be able to put not only just policies, legislation, and practice in place that helps women who have been abused and tormented either by friends or at home or in the general public. A policy that says, this is against the law to abuse her body. Just because you are married to this person does not give you the right to kill them, whether it's an emotional killing or a physical killing, because after he's thrown you down the steps, there's nothing else he can do but kill you. And work it out. So, because what happens is if the policy is not in place, once she reports this, then her life is in danger. And her children's lives are in danger. And we don't have enough resources to be able to create places for safe spaces for women to go. Women need to have safe spaces for them to go. That's one part. The other part is teaching and training both public officials, leaders, and women themselves, and it begins with the young girls, the signs of abuse, the signs of emotional abuse and physical abuse. The slap on the face, and baby, I ain't gonna do it no more. That's not gonna work. That's a sign that after you accept that, then it's going to be escalated. Emotional abuse. If you really love me, you really would not wear that red shirt. And then when you wear that red shirt, you said that you love me, but yet you wore it anyway. And then you say, oh, well, I won't do that again. And then slowly that emotional abuse begins to dismantle who you are until you become someone that you do not even recognize. And young girls and women are not taught these signs, these incremental signs of physical and emotional abuse. These kinds of things must be taught to leaders in every aspect, which is why we created SALA, We honor the mothers of womanism. Yes, we do. The Renita Weems, we honor Katie Cannon, God bless her heart, Dolores Carpenter. We honor the mothers of womanists. But sometimes we talk always in our own silos and we hear our own voices. It is great for educators to come together and dialogue about critical issues, great for preachers to come together, great for activists to come together. But sometimes all of us need to be at the same table so that we can craft our own agenda instead of allowing other people to craft an agenda and come to us and ask us to co-sign. We develop the agenda, the policy, the plan, the legislation, and then we go and ask them to co-sign. There's much to be done.
Yes, at Justice for Black Girls, we're super passionate about the End Push Out Act. Black girls in New York City are expelled 53 times more than their white girl counterparts. And it's because schools have become spaces that don't embrace Black girlhood. Rather than affirming Black girlhood, they condemn Black girlhood, and we expect Black girls to show up a particular way, and when they don't, we push them out. So at schools, Black girls are disproportionately criminalized, they're disproportionately adultified, and there's spaces that actually make them realize that they have closer relationships with injustice than justice. The space designed to push them to wholeness fragments them, right? And so through the End Push Out Act, we're thinking about the ways in which policies and procedures facilitate girls out of prison and into, or out of schools rather, and into prisons or in other juvenile facilities. And so we're particularly concerned about schools as institutions that fail to adequately protect our girls and create safe spaces for them. Instead of pushing them out, instead of suspending them, instead of expelling them, there need to be resources. There need to be spaces and places that affirm them, that one, are helping them unlearn all the things and all the narratives that tell them they're not enough, that tell them they're not intelligent, that tell them they're not capable, and then replacing those with positive supports. And so the End Push Out Act, pushed by Ayanna Pressley and Bonnie Coleman and Dr. Monique Morris, and her fabulous book, Push Out: The Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools, is an incredible, incredible piece of legislation that we must keep advocating for.
I'll say that it's important, in addition to what has already been lifted up in terms of policy. I think that policies have often failed Black girls and Black women because people don't believe Black girls and Black women. And so we can have as many policy changes as possible, but as long as we don't do the work of culture shifting and consciousness raising, Black women can be crying out and for advocacy, could be crying out for help, could be crying out for intervention. But if no one believes that they're actually suffering and living through the hell that we profess to live through, it doesn't matter what policies get changed. And so we have to start actually listening to Black women and Black girls and believing the testimonies that we give about the realities of our lives. And I think that policy, the work of policy and culture go together. And so we have to do some culture shifting around how we talk about Black women, how we talk up to Black women. Anytime you hear a woman referred to outside of her name, there's a cultural issue. Anytime you're listening or consuming media that demeans Black women and speaks of us in terms, in animalistic terms, you are pushing us further away from the goal. And so in addition, like I said, to what has been lifted up in terms of policy, I think what's also important is we have to do work around shifting and shaping culture that believes Black women and protects Black women and honors our humanity and our dignity. And I think that if we start there, then policy has a chance to help to save us.
Yes, and I wanted to get the exact number because I read something the other day from African that they are depressed compared to 31% of white girls. So therefore, obviously, a policy needs to be in place where we are helping provide mental services to Black girls for all the trauma that they have to go through, that they have to face, because reality is a lot of them don't feel comfortable seeing the school counselor. That's what they tell me, that they don't feel comfortable talking to a school counselor, or they feel like they don't have a safe space in school. So we need to put some services in place in order to help our Black girls through these mental struggles that they're going through, and not just say they'll grow out of it, or this is just you acting like a teenager, or you just have the attitude, because then they're really suffering in silence, but then we call it an attitude. No, it's not an attitude. They're hurting inside, and we have to take the time out to create a safe space to hear what they have to say, and don't just identify them as the girl with the nasty attitude. No, take the time and create a policy in order to meet their emotional needs. And that's my little 2 cents, for the policy.
Before you move on to the next question, I just think we need to begin earlier. I think we began at somewhere in middle school, or we just begin in high school to have these conversations to help Black girls as they mature into grown women. I think you really need to start way early before the mind develops its own analytical process. Because what you learn at 5, 6, and 7 about what you look like and who you are and how people treat you will override your analytical mind when you get to 12, 13, and 14 that says, well, no, maybe that's not true. But back on the inside, that's where I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not cute enough, I'm not bright enough. That's where that subconscious mind begins to override the analytical mind. I said, wait a minute now, I graduated. I can read, I can speak, I have a mind, I can paint, I can create, I can write poems, I'm an engineer, I can build, I can do these things. But the subconscious mind that got put in place, got fed, seeds were put into when you were 5, 6, 7, and 8, overrides this part, and it rises up to say we're not enough when we are. And we need to say that to each other, and we need to say that to the children before they get to middle school, before they get to high school.
Can I also just add very quickly, just to underscore the importance of starting earlier with girls, I think we also need to start earlier with boys. We need to start actually humanizing our boys and detoxifying them from toxic masculinity before that is seeped into their spirit and into their system. We need to begin earlier to socialize our boys to see women as human and not just objects. We have to socialize our boys earlier to see women as integral to all of creation and not just for their pleasure and their fulfillment. Just wanted to add that as well.
Perfect segue to my final question, and we have about 5 minutes left. So as quickly as you can respond to this. I know it can be extensive, but I just really want to know, in your field or in your advocacy, what can non-Black women and femmes and girls do to do better by us? Because I think sometimes so much of it comes back to what we're not doing, and we're not holding people in our communities accountable. And so much of what's going on with us is outside of us. So yes, we have internalized misogynoir, and we perpetuate things and hand it down. But a lot of folks just aren't asking these so-called allies and Black men and folks in our communities to do better too. So 50 seconds or less per person, what can Black men and alleged allies, potential allies do to do better by Black women, femmes, and girls in our communities?
At JBG, we're fiercely advocating that all allies redistribute their funds and place them in the hands of Black girls, leverage their privilege, right? Create space for Black women and Black girls to lead, elevate the voices of Black girls, don't do work for Black girls, get behind Black girls, allow them to do the work for themselves, right? Far too often we drench Black girls in empowerment. We try to give them self-help programs, but no, we need to put them in power positions, right? Allow them to be stakeholders, right? In their own lives, right? We do not need to make decisions for Black girls. We need to allow them to make decisions for themselves and give them the power to do so. Redistribute your funds, leverage your privilege, leverage your position to put Black girls in position to lead.
Well, you know, I believe that that we ought to share with allies and those who are in other communities the rights that we have. And we have to teach those rights and stand with those rights and help them to honor our rights and the diversity of Blackness. So I would say that, you know, we have a right as human beings to be dressed as such and not as objects. We have a right to conduct affairs of our lives and our families with dignity. And we have a right to speak against those who would eschew that our dignity and our integrity. We have a right to purchase a product, goods and services from companies or corporations who have a policy of racism and sexism, no matter how subtle their culture is. We have a right to invest and divest our financial interests from countries and companies who abuse and oppress women and other human beings. In other words, we have to hold them accountable to be sure if they say they value us as human beings, those values show up in their policy and their practice. And when it doesn't, we have a right. We have a right to call them. We have a right to call them out. We have a right to be respected and widen our circle of concerns. As we respect, we hold you accountable to respect us. And we have a right to participate in the flow of goods and services without being denied access to appropriate resources. And yes, I agree with my sister that you should divest some of your resources to help undergird those of us who are promoting resourcing women and helping them to handle power and authority appropriately. Is not that we're asking you to make space for us just because. We're asking you to give us an opportunity to be in that space because we're qualified, we're experienced, we have a track record, we have been prepared, and we can. And so we're just asking for our piece of real estate. That's it.
So one thing I'm going to challenge the Black men in our context, talking about the faith community context, is every Black man, every Black preacher who is a male, when you see a Black girl who has a calling on her life, don't only push the Black male, but push the Black female. Encourage her to go to seminary as well. Encourage her to, and once she gets her degree in seminary, don't sit there. And I think we ignore the fact and we don't address the fact that we push Black males to use their voices in ministry more than we do the female, which is why there's a subtle competition with women in ministry that can be avoided, because sometimes they feel like there's only room, a room for one at the table. But if you see that young girl who is anointed and powerful, encourage her as well. Hook her up with another woman in ministry who can possibly be her mentor, but don't ignore her voice because you want to see your Black son take on your legacy, but you know God really called the female. Okay, so I'm just saying, just give us a space and opportunity, and once we qualified, honor us in that space. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. And just in addition to everything that has been listed up, I mean, I think if I could sum it up, I would say to people who want to be allies to Black women, I would just say, move out of the way. Move out of the way. Because if it's true that Black women are more prepared, more educated, more qualified, and better at our jobs than many of our allies, then you should move out of the way and allow us to consume the spaces that not only are we called, but we're also capable to consume. Move out of the way. Stop taking up space that really should be filled by a Black woman. And I'm not just talking about the cases when you need somebody to come up and be your cleanup woman. I'm talking about the spaces. You need a woman to innovate, to lead, and to build with vision, with integrity, with character, and with creativity. I'm going to say this: if you don't move out the way, next thing that you could do is don't get mad when we decide that we don't want that space anymore. Don't get mad when we decide that we're done trying to politic for a place in your company, in your C-suite, in your institution, and we decide that instead of trying to politic for that place, we're going to go build a place of our own, and we're going to take our sisters with us. So it's either move out of the way or don't be mad when we decide we leave it.
Well,
what else can be said after that?
okay.
Thank you all so much. This has just been such an amazing conversation. And they're going to be transitioning soon into the next panel. But just to wrap, essentially what I got from the panel is following Black women's leadership, celebrating Black women, listening to Black women, trusting Black women, loving Black women, paying Black women, centering us, and then thanking us. With that, thank you all so much. And I hope you all continue to follow these leaders. Their social media is on the screen. Their information is on the website for the JusticeCon. And hopefully this conversation does not end with the end of this panel. So again, thank you all so much.